It's wonderful to see everyone here at Brookings, and I want to welcome all of you who are on the webcast joining us this morning. We are also very pleased that you can join us. We have a great lineup of speakers today to talk about the role of small business and entrepreneurship in reviving older industrial economies like Detroit. Now, the event is called Big Bets because when a city's already slow-growing economy craters, thanks to the Great Recession and the collapse of a major industry, it is big bets, not small steps, that's in order. And so leaders in Detroit, mostly outside of government, from philanthropy, business, university, nonprofit sectors, many of them who are represented here today, they stepped up, they took risks, they acted boldly, together, to concentrate investments in ways that can jumpstart the city's economy. And as you listen to Rip and our distinguished panelists this morning, you'll hear about their big investments in small business and entrepreneurship, but you're also going to hear more. These leaders had vision. They forged new collaborations. They tested new innovative financing vehicles, and they pushed the envelope of their own organization's missions to ensure that economic investments made a sizable difference in improving opportunities in the city and for the residents. And the story about big bets, it's not just about Detroit. Detroit is a living case study for all cities, contending with the economic shocks and transitions. And if there is one wake-up call from our recent presidential election, it is that our policies and our strategies don't do a good enough job helping a broad swath of workers and communities adjust from disruptive forces, whether it's an unprecedented recession or the consequences of open trade and greater global competition. So let me close with one more reason why we should pay attention to Detroit's experience. It's working. Early signs demonstrate that the concerted efforts in the city, which dates back now nearly 10 years, are showing signs of promise. According to our annual Metro Monitor, Greater Detroit has added jobs every year from 2010 to 2015. This is a stark reversal from consecutive years of job loss in the past decade. In terms of entrepreneurship and firm dynamism, Detroit now has a growing number of people working for young firms, and that too is a positive uptick from the period between 2005 and 2010 when jobs in young firms declined by 30%. And Detroit is adding jobs faster in some industries than the national average. These are industries such as credit intermediation, motor vehicle parts production, scientific research and R&D, and insurance. So while Detroit is not without its challenges, the market momentum is real. So please join us today in this conversation, both here in this room and those on the webcast. We have a hashtag for you to engage in this dialogue. And before I turn the program over to Rip, I want to take a moment to thank the Kresge Foundation and J.P. Morgan Chase for providing general support to the Brookings Metro program. Their support and their guidance helps make the work we do possible. And I'd like to reiterate Brookings' commitment to independence and underscore that the views expressed today are solely those of the speakers. Now it is my pleasure to introduce someone I greatly admire, the President and CEO of the Kresge Foundation.
Thank you, Amy, and good morning. It's such a pleasure always to partner with Amy and her team in any shape and form, and particularly so on this topic where they have such deep expertise, experience, and thoughtfulness to bear. Although Kresge is a national foundation that focuses on expanding opportunities in cities across the United States, our core identity has been deeply tied to Detroit since our founding in 1924. Nowhere is our philanthropic imprint more indelible than in our hometown. This is in part why Detroit's Renaissance is particularly meaningful to us. To better understand both the contours of Detroit's rebound following its municipal bankruptcy and its outlook going forward, Kresge began gathering data to capture perceptions about Detroit. Last year, we sought to measure national business leaders' attitudes toward the city. With the 2017 Detroit Reinvestment Index, we seek to build on this data once again by surveying national business leaders. But we also wanted to capture Detroit metro area entrepreneurs' thinking and perceptions about living, working, and starting a business in the Motor City. We wanted to test the proposition that Detroit's continued rebirth is closely tied to the vitality and perceptions of its business community, particularly those entrepreneurial ventures and small businesses located in and serving Detroit's neighborhoods. We wanted to determine how those businesses interpret what is working and what is not. We also think this research can offer insights to other cities, both here in the United States and around the world, those that are experiencing similar challenges and opportunities. So let me walk you through some of the notable findings from this year's Detroit Reinvestment Index. For the second year in a row, national business leaders are bullish on Detroit. 84% of business leaders believe Detroit can recover and become a great American city once again. A strong majority, 72%, rate Detroit as an excellent or good investment opportunity. This reflects a number of drivers. Amy described some of these, but let me just cite a handful more. First, a growing number of large corporate anchors are moving downtown, reviving the downtown's commercial real estate market. Quicken Loans alone has relocated more than 15,000 employees into the urban core. Second, there has been a dramatic set of public-private investments in public spaces, things like the Detroit Riverfront, the DeQuinder Cut Bikeway and Walkway, Belle Isle, Eastern Market, the nation's largest public market, and countless neighborhood parks. Third, we've seen an explosion in small business ventures and entrepreneurial incubators, and I'll talk more about that in just a moment. Fourth, we'll celebrate this fall the opening of a spectacular new sports, housing, commercial complex that will house both the Detroit Pistons and the Red Wings, making Detroit the only United States city to have all four of its major sports franchises located within its downtown core. And fifth, just last Friday, we opened the Q Line, a streetcar that runs from the heart of downtown along the city's major arterial, Woodward Avenue, to Midtown, some 3.5 miles up the road. In a city in which more than 30% of residents don't own a car, it's hard to imagine a policy that has had more profoundly negative impacts on economic opportunity than the absence of a coherent, comprehensive public regional transit system capable of connecting city residents to job and service centers. 10 years ago, Kresge and a handful of private sector leaders attempted to dismantle these obstacles by planning, financing, constructing, and then turning over to a public transit authority a streetcar that would be the first leg of an integrated regional transit system. Despite only being in operation for a few days, $7 billion in new investment has occurred along the Q Line's route. About 2/3 of these investment dollars are complete, with another $2.5 billion on the way. Our research also shows that it's not just big business executives who are buoyant about Detroit's future. Detroit entrepreneurs, those with firsthand experience and knowledge about the city, are even more enthusiastic about the city's comeback. 92% believe Detroit can recover and become a great city again. 83% rate Detroit as an excellent or good opportunity for their business. 88% are likely to recommend opening and operating a small business in Detroit. Additionally, young entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of color are among some of the most positive of our surveyed population. 8 in 10 of young entrepreneurs have favorable impressions of Detroit. 94% are likely to recommend Detroit as a city to open and operate a small business. 74% of entrepreneurs of color have favorable impressions of Detroit. 92% are likely to recommend Detroit as a city to open and operate a small business. Small businesses owned and operated by people of color are inextricably interwoven into Detroit's history and fabric. In the 1960s, the city had more African-American-owned small businesses than any other city in America. The decline of those businesses has been one of the most painful elements of Detroit's struggles over the last decades. So it's profoundly gratifying to see signs that this very important part of the city's heritage and culture may be on the uptick once again. Both the young entrepreneurs and the entrepreneurs of color give Detroit a place, make Detroit a place, both the young entrepreneurs and and entrepreneurs of color give Detroit high marks for what they say they need most in a business environment. A place looking to attract new investments, where it's possible to make a difference, and a city with potential. So taken all together, that's a remarkably positive picture. So what accounts for this optimism? There are a lot of reasons, and I've noted a couple of them, but let me throw in one more. Philanthropy's decision 10 years ago to create a $100 million fund to develop an entrepreneurial infrastructure in Southeast Michigan. 10 foundations signed on to this effort, with Kresge, Ford, and Kellogg each making lead gifts of $25 million. Called the New Economy Initiative, the effort sought to create the supports that small businesses in the city needed in order to get started and to grow. Technical assistance, mentoring and networking opportunities, early-stage capital, affordable space, and many others. The effort set in motion a flywheel of small business growth that is increasingly radiating to all corners of the city. The explosion of small businesses in Detroit has not only dramatically diversified the city's economy, but has also enabled families to build assets, attracted new jobs into neighborhoods, stabilized commercial corridors vital to the neighborhood's identity and safety. It's the sort of promising start that we've long worked toward. The results of NEI have been breathtaking. Pam Lewis of our panel will tell you more about that in a moment. But consider that the New Economy Initiative has generated the following: direct assistance to more than 4,400 companies, the launch of more than 1,600 companies, the creation of almost 18,000 jobs, and nearly $3 billion in economic output. It's rewarding to see the business community join us in recognizing the role that small businesses have played in Detroit's upward trajectory. 93% of national business leaders and Detroit entrepreneurs agree that small businesses have been at the core of the revitalization of the city and of the region. There are, to be sure, still gaps. Gaps between what small business owners and entrepreneurs say they need to succeed and what Detroit provides. For example, Detroit entrepreneurs said that Detroit would need to do a number of things to continue small business growth. First, ensure enough skilled workers to fill open positions. Second, improve the quality of the city's neighborhoods. And third, attend to the need to build a more robust base of customers with spending power. These concerns translate into a recognition by both national business leaders and Detroit entrepreneurs that neighborhood revitalization efforts are every bit as important, and perhaps even more important, than traditional economic development tools. Entrepreneurs who work and live primarily in Detroit are, for example, more likely to call for high-quality public spaces, parks, libraries, trails, access to the Detroit riverfront for employees, and many others. They see these public assets, together with other essential building blocks of neighborhood stability and health, as centrally important to their business succeeding. To work on the tough, intractable problems that Detroit presents, it requires one to have a healthy dose of optimism, even idealism, words that may sound quaint in the coarseness of the current political environment. But under the circumstances, to be anything other than an optimist, anything other than an idealist, strikes me as a profoundly unproductive use of our time. And it's deeply gratifying, therefore, to see that others share our hopeful view about Detroit's comeback and its continued progress. And we're going to turn it over to the panel now to sort of pick up on some of these themes, not only as they apply to Detroit, but all across our nation's cities. The panel will be moderated by a colleague I am just delighted to be able to introduce. Chantel Rush joined Kresge a couple of years ago after a stint at the Harvard Business School and many years in the private sector. And she has rapidly emerged as one of the really inspiring leaders in the philanthropic space. We're just delighted to have her and delighted to turn over the events to you, Chantel. Thanks very much.